My wife led a double life with a childhood friend named Mark, and then she asked for a break in the relationship for a year when I saw them together. Did you know that the average high school romance typically lasts about 3 weeks? Well, Lisa Turner and Mark Howard shattered that statistic with a relationship that spanned an impressive 40 years. They first met when Lisa was a freshman and Mark was a sophomore. From that moment on, they were inseparable. Their love was genuine, almost legendary, and it withstood the test of time without losing its luster. Interestingly, Lisa and I were married for around 30 of those years, and during that time, I truly believed our happiness was real. Our marriage was fulfilling, and the birth of our daughter Emma only strengthened our bond. Generally, I felt content during those years. Allow me to introduce myself and share some background on this significant part of my life. I am David Mitchell, and Lisa has been my devoted wife for nearly 3 decades. As I mentioned, Lisa and Mark were high school sweethearts, and yes, she lost her innocence to him. It's well known that most high school romances eventually fizzle out, but theirs seemed more like a pause. Since Mark was a year ahead in school, he aspired to build his wealth after graduation to marry Lisa. This was a story my wife often recounted throughout our marriage. After high school, Mark took a job on a pipeline in Alaska with his uncle, which marked the beginning of complications. Mark stopped writing shortly after arriving, leaving Lisa alone during her senior year. She briefly dated a guy named Sam, but her heart was still set on Mark. Despite Lisa's patient waiting, Mark remained absent and silent. It turned out he found fulfillment in the pipeline work and adopted a somewhat nomadic lifestyle, believing that Lisa was still waiting for him to return wealthy and sweep her off her feet. However, life goes on, and nothing stays the same. Lisa moved on, pursued higher education, earned her degree, and met me at a party when she was 24. Though I was a bit older at 29, we complemented each other well. I fell for her instantly and believed she felt the same about me. Our marriage was mostly typical, except for a hiccup 2 days before our wedding when a letter from Mark arrived asking Lisa to meet him. Thankfully, Lisa's mother stepped in, advising her to focus on her new life and not waste time on Mark. After some emotional moments, during which I feared she might call off the wedding, she married me and became Mrs. Lisa Mitchell. By the time Mark resurfaced, we were already on our honeymoon, and in his despair, he apparently enlisted in the Marines. After our honeymoon, we settled into our new routines with Lisa working as a nurse and me as an insurance adjuster for a major company. While our marriage remained strong, there was a recurring issue. Mark began texting Lisa, and she responded willingly. When I questioned this, she became defensive, insisting he was just an old friend who needed support. I was aware of their correspondence and her reciprocal letters. Despite efforts from both her family and myself, she persisted until news arrived that he had married someone at his station, ending their communication and restoring my peace of mind. Over the next 3 years, she received just 3 Christmas cards from Mark, and that was the extent of it. During this pause in communication with Mark, our daughter Emma was born. With our newborn in tow, Lisa and I worked diligently to build a home and farm to provide Emma with a good life. Those were indeed good days, and we worked together harmoniously to raise our child. However, as often happens, a disruption arose. One day, Lisa received a letter from Mark. Although she never discussed it, I noticed our stamp consumption increasing, leading me to conclude she had resumed correspondence with him. Despite this, I chose to overlook it, considering his duty to protect democracy while I ensured my family's well-being. If they chose to write to each other, I deemed it their business, regardless of my sentiments. Eventually, Lisa began sharing tidbits she had gleaned from Mark. He had divorced his first wife, but remarried, seen combat, and was apparently highly decorated. While I listened with only partial attention, Lisa spoke with pride about her former Marine. I gently corrected her, reminding her he preferred to be called a Marine, not a soldier. Lisa chuckled sweetly and remarked that she should be cautious. Watching her discuss him saddened me, yet I hoped she would move on and focus on our family. Unfortunately, that day never came. Mark had served in the Marines for 30 years, experienced 3 marriages and divorces, and garnered enough medals to rival General Patton. I realized with dismay that while Mark had become more charming to my wife over the years, I had simply grown older and more predictable. My only solace was the hope that Mark, upon discharge, would settle far from us. Regrettably, that was not the case. Our daughter Emma is now a grown woman, married to a wonderful man named Michael Foster. Even more delightful news is that they are expecting their first child. At 60, I eagerly anticipate reaching the milestone age of 65 when I can retire and enjoy my remaining years in peace and tranquility. Lisa still looks as radiant as ever and has the ability to make my heart skip a beat. Little did I realize that the peace in my life would soon be shattered. One Thursday, upon returning home, I found Lisa dressed impeccably, informing me of a dinner reservation at 7. Initially perplexed, I searched my memory for any forgotten anniversary or birthday, only to realize that was not the case. So I went along with it, heading to our bedroom to freshen up and attempt to match Lisa's elegance. Dinner was fantastic, and the restaurant was crowded, leading me to suspect Lisa had more on her mind than just enjoying the food. As we neared the end of our meal, I leaned in and told her to spill it because I was in a good mood and wouldn't make a scene. One of my quirks is that I never lose my cool in public. Years in the insurance industry have trained me to keep my composure, a habit that's carried into my personal life. Lisa knew this well, so whenever she had troubling news, she'd choose a public setting to deliver it. Tonight, something felt off just by looking at her face. After 30 years together, you get good at reading your partner. I had a sinking feeling tonight, convinced something would ruin my evening. Finally, with evident hesitation, she told me that Mark was back. Instantly, a wave of nausea hit me, though I knew it wasn't the food. I stared at her, waiting for more details, but Lisa just gazed back at me with a somber expression. When I asked for clarification, she explained that Mark had been discharged from the army and bought a house 2 streets away from us. My anxiety spiked, and I interrupted, asking if he was moving in with his 3rd wife. She replied quietly that he was divorced again and had lost part of his pension because of her. Trying to contain my anger, I muttered that this was too much. Some nearby diners glanced our way. My frustration wasn't about Mark losing his pension, but because he had moved so close, and I needed to understand why. I pressed on, asking Lisa if she had met up with Mark. Her face gave me the answer she didn't even respond when I followed up. She admitted that he came by our house to tell her they were now neighbors. My heart pounded as I continued questioning, fearing the worst, and asked if she had slept with him. Her expression revealed everything before she admitted she had, but claimed it wasn't what I thought. I glared at her, almost growling, and told her I believed my wife had cheated on me and demanded an explanation. She said that Mark needed her, seemed lost, and was struggling with anxiety from the divorce. She admitted she still loved Mark, too. There it was. My wife had slept with Mark, using his PTSD and divorce as a way back into her heart and bed. I looked her straight in the eye and said firmly that the damage was done and we could work through it, but she couldn't sleep with him again. She tearfully replied that she couldn't promise that because she loved him and he needed her more than I did. Hearing that was devastating, but a public restaurant wasn't the place for our private drama. I signaled for the bill. 10 minutes later, we were in the car heading home when I brought it up again, asking how she could be with him, knowing she was married and reminding her of our vows from nearly 30 years ago. She began sobbing and confessed that she was sorry, but he needed her, and they had found each other again. She couldn't bear the thought of losing either of us. I was at a loss for what to say or do to make her let him go. Frustrated, I exclaimed, asking if we should take turns, with him getting her on New Year's and me on Christmas, and told her she couldn't have 2 men. She stopped crying and suggested a break, reminding me of when I took a year off to get my master's degree. I shook my head irritably, saying she couldn't compare me getting a degree that benefited our family to her involvement with Mark, which only benefited the 2 of them. By this point, I pulled into our driveway and turned off the engine. Lisa reached out and touched my face lovingly, pleading for me to give her a year to get Mark out of her system. She promised to be the best wife to me and said she needed this time. I felt a storm of emotions: sadness, hurt, shock, and depression. The urge to lash out surged within me, but I recalled stories about men who lost their freedom in fits of rage. I reluctantly agreed, but insisted she shouldn't expect my approval, and that I didn't want to see or hear from her for the entire year, warning that she might have no one to come back to. I hoped my strict conditions might deter her, but it seemed futile. She appeared deaf to my words, agreeing and kissing my cheek, expressing gratitude and assuring me I wouldn't regret it. I shook my head, telling her it was too late, and I already regretted it. That night she wanted to be close, but I ignored her. The thought of her with Mark made me feel sick, and I couldn't bear the idea of physical closeness. As we prepared for bed, I took a pillow and informed her I'd sleep in the guest room. I noticed this deeply hurt her, and part of me was glad, hoping she might reconsider. The following morning, I woke up hoping last night was just a bad dream and that Lisa would have a change of heart. I was wrong. In the kitchen, she was making breakfast, looking as if she had just won the lottery. She smiled at me and pointed to the calendar on the wall. Today's date, June 6th, was circled with a thick black line. Sitting at the table, I thought about the irony. In 1944, thousands fought to liberate Europe from tyranny, and today I lost my wife to another form of oppression. Lisa seemed almost euphoric as she served breakfast, saying she understood my concerns, but that a year from today, she'd return and be solely mine. She needed this time to sort things out and clear her head, and she promised I wouldn't regret it. She smiled contentedly before continuing, explaining that she called Mark that morning while I was still asleep and told him I agreed to her vacation, and he would pick her up in an hour. Every word she spoke made my heart sink, but I felt compelled to give her another chance. I urged her to reconsider and not risk destroying what we had. She grinned at me with an air of superiority and spoke gently, appreciating the love I had shown by granting her this time and assuring me she knew what she was doing. She believed our marriage would be even stronger when she returned. With those words, she left the kitchen, effectively marking her emotional departure from our relationship. Despite the tasteless meal, I forced myself to finish eating and then went to get dressed. Entering our bedroom, I was met with the sight of Lisa's 3 large suitcases, all packed and ready. She smiled at me with a mix of affection and determination and asked me to take the bags to the porch for Mark. I stared at her in disbelief before refusing. Her face registered shock at my refusal. I continued, adding that if she was determined to throw away 30 years of marriage, she and that man could carry the bags themselves. I wouldn't help in this ridiculous endeavor. Lisa seemed on the verge of tears before snapping back, defending Mark as a wonderful man and a hero who served our country. I turned away, muttering about working 5 days a week to provide for her and our daughter. Lisa struggled to haul her luggage downstairs, glaring at me with every trip. Soon after, a car pulled up, and a man I assumed to be Mark started loading her bags. Lisa called out to him, saying she'd be right there, then came back to say goodbye. We stood facing each other awkwardly until I broke the silence, reminding her of the terms and that there should be no contact for the entire year. I could see reality starting to hit her as she meekly replied that she understood, but believed it would all work out. She waited for my response, but I stayed silent. Finally, looking more uncertain, she said she really loved me, then leaned in for a kiss, but I turned away, so she settled for a touch on my cheek. Hastily, I said I couldn't kiss her, knowing she was going to him. Tears streamed down her face as she rushed out of the house and into his arms. From the doorway, I watched her embrace him passionately, feeling rage boil within me. 2 minutes later, my driveway was empty, reflecting the emptiness inside me as I realized my wife was now with another man. I called in sick to work that morning and headed straight to the hardware store to buy new locks. I spent the entire morning changing every lock on the house and updating the security codes. This task kept me busy and distracted, but once I finished, the sadness crashed over me like a tidal wave. In my despair, I did what many do. I turned off our home phone and started drinking heavily. Though I hoped to numb the pain of losing Lisa, it was a futile effort. My drinking binge continued until Sunday morning when I ran out of alcohol, which was a small relief as I felt utterly drained. I finally went to bed and fell into a deep, troubled sleep, only to be awakened by persistent knocking. Groggy, I stumbled around to find my daughter Emma at the door. When I let her in, she looked horrified by my disheveled state and the strong smell of alcohol. Emma was concerned and guided me to the kitchen, insisting I needed coffee and food before I could explain what had been happening. An hour later, with food in my stomach and a cup of coffee in my hand, I told her everything I knew about her mother and Mark. Her reaction was one of utter shock. She couldn't believe that her mom was taking a year-long break from our marriage to rekindle things with her high school boyfriend. Emma asked about my plan, and I told her I was calling in sick again the next day and consulting a lawyer. Emma looked heartbroken and suggested that maybe her mom was having a mental breakdown. I honestly didn't know. Emma stayed with me for several hours, even preparing dinner before she left. She kissed me goodbye and apologized again before departing, explaining that her mom had called and asked her to check on me. I felt terrible on Monday, but had a meeting with a lawyer. My suspicions about Lisa were confirmed. The divorce proceedings would lean in my favor due to her infidelity, preventing her from claiming half my pension. However, other shared assets remained unresolved. This break could present an opportunity to settle those matters. The next 3 weeks flew by, and I was surprised by how easily I adapted to being alone. On the positive side, I no longer felt the burden of being responsible for another person. However, the downside was the loneliness of waking up and going to bed alone. I didn't hear from Lisa until mid-July. One Saturday, I visited a posh tavern in town. While I sat at the bar, they walked in holding hands like love-struck teenagers, completely oblivious to my presence. Watching them, I saw Mark's muscular, moderately attractive appearance and understood Lisa's attraction. However, he seemed controlling, and she followed his lead submissively. He talked, and she listened intently. As she headed to the restroom, she finally noticed me and gave a timid smile. When she came out, she approached me hesitantly. Despite my urge to lash out, I kept my cool and replied that I was doing as well as one could be when their wife of 30 years leaves for another man. She explained that she needed to get into the house because she had left some personal things there, but her key didn't work when she tried the other day. I smiled, maintaining a friendly tone, and told her it shouldn't surprise her that her key didn't work in my house since she didn't live there anymore. She looked puzzled as I continued, suggesting she get back to her boyfriend before he got worried. Tears welled up in her eyes as she turned and walked away. I resumed focusing on my drink. 2 minutes later, I felt a rough hand on my shoulder, spinning me around to face an angry Mark. He confronted me about making his woman cry and looked ready to hit me. My heart raced, knowing he could overpower me before anyone could intervene. Summoning more courage than I felt, I went on the offensive, telling him he was talking about my wife, not his woman. Since he had stolen her, he had no right to interfere in our matters. I warned him that hitting me would involve the police. I could see Mark struggling to process my words, knowing he wasn't exactly the brightest bulb in the box. This gave me the confidence to press on, telling him he had 2 choices: punch me and spend time in jail or walk away and mind his own business. My heart raced as I spoke, but I maintained a facade of bravado. Mark glared at me, fists clenched, but before he could decide, the manager approached us, asking if there was a problem. Mark muttered that there was no problem, and slunk back toward Lisa. 5 minutes later, they settled their bill and left. On the drive home, my mind raced with thoughts about what personal items Lisa might want from the house. Determined to find out, I spent hours searching through every nook and cranny. Finally, buried beneath some old clothes in her closet, I found a stack of letters from Mark to Lisa. As I read through them, it became clear that their affair had been brewing for years. One letter, dated 5 years earlier, comforted Lisa, saying he missed her, and that when he came back, they'd be together, and she would have to find a way to get rid of her weak husband. Reading through the letters felt like leafing through a tawdry romance novel. Many detailed their plans or reminisced about their high school days. By the time I finished, it was evident that life without Lisa was going to be simpler, albeit lonelier. I didn't hear from Lisa until my birthday on September 1st. Coming home from work, I found a covered dish and a birthday card on the porch. Bringing them inside, I saw she had made my favorite stew. The card read, "Happy birthday, David," with a note inside. She explained that she knew we weren't supposed to communicate, but she couldn't ignore my birthday. She dreamed about us every night, and by the end of this year, she promised she would be mine again and that he would be gone. She pleaded for me never to stop loving her or abandon us. My daughter Emma had been keeping a close eye on me since Lisa left. She called me on my birthday. After some small talk, she got to the point, reminding me of her due date in 3 weeks. I assured her I hadn't forgotten and was thrilled about the birth of our first grandchild. There was a brief pause before Emma continued, explaining that she and Michael had dinner with Mom and Mark the previous night. She informed me that her mom wanted to be there when the baby was born and wanted Mark to be there too. She asked if I could make an exception to our no-contact rule for her. The news that Emma and her husband had dined with them stunned me, but I didn't want to ruin the occasion of my first grandchild's birth. I reluctantly agreed, but Emma immediately corrected me, asking me to stop calling him and explaining that he wasn't a bad guy and made her mom happy. She hadn't seen her mom this joyful in years. Anger surged through me as I remembered the strong words Emma's grandmother had for Mark years ago, and I expressed my frustration, feeling that he was tearing our family apart. Emma quickly responded, apologizing and explaining she didn't mean it that way. She imagined how I felt and was truly sorry. I coldly told her to forget about it and made an excuse about having something in the oven. Emma said she loved me and hung up. It was then that I realized my life would never be the same, and I needed to take action. First, I began liquidating my assets to reduce my net worth. Second, I faced my fears and re-entered the world. The next few days were stressful. I sought legal advice on asset management, obtained a stun gun for self-defense in case of a confrontation with Mark, and booked a trip to Las Vegas for October. Additionally, I started searching for companionship online, hoping to find a woman my age looking for a stable, long-term relationship. With Lisa gone, I had the freedom to use or dispose of my possessions as I saw fit, giving me significant control over my future plans. The day Emma went into labor, I was at work. My secretary answered the phone. It was Michael, elated to tell me I was a grandfather. I congratulated him and rushed to the hospital. Upon arriving, I found Emma's room and headed there. As I approached the door, I overheard a heated conversation between Emma and Lisa. Emma expressed frustration with the situation between me and her mom, asking if her mom really wanted to lose me for Mark. Lisa reassured her, saying she wouldn't lose me because my love for her was too strong. She described her relationship with Mark as amazing, making every day feel like high school again, only better now that they were physically together. Emma voiced her disdain, explaining she didn't want to hear about her mom's love life with Mark. She wanted her child to have grandparents who were together, not separated. Emma pleaded with her mom to go back to me before it was too late, highlighting that I was constant and wouldn't abandon her, unlike the charming but ultimately temporary nature of Mark. There was a brief silence before Emma pleaded again, warning her mom not to wait too long or she might lose me. Lisa confidently told Emma not to worry about me and her, believing that when she was done with Mark, I would welcome her back with open arms. Emma's skepticism was clear, as she told her mom that I was changing, becoming more bitter and distant since she left. She questioned if her mom was really willing to throw away 30 years of marriage for a high school fling. Having heard enough, I stepped into the room with a forced smile and congratulated Emma on her new son. I hugged her, deliberately ignoring Lisa. Lisa glared at me, but Emma beamed and asked if I had seen the baby yet. I replied that I hadn't and had come to check on her first. Tired of the tension, Lisa spoke up, acknowledging the passing of time since we had brought our baby home and now had a grandchild. I glanced at her, still holding Mark's hand, and walked out without a word. She looked confused as I left them standing there. October arrived, turning out to be the best month I had experienced since Lisa left. I took a trip to Vegas, initially planning to lose some money at the tables as an excuse to diminish our shared assets. However, the trip took an unexpected turn when I met Hannah, a sophisticated woman in her 50s. She explained that many men seek the company of an older woman, and in my case, she was right. Hannah was expensive, but she made me feel more alive than I had in years. For the first time since Lisa left, I didn't miss her at all. Hannah was not only skilled in bed, but also genuinely interested in me. She asked about my soon-to-be ex-wife and her new partner, and by the end of the night, she knew almost as much about my life as I did. Moved by my story, she gently touched my face before leaving, telling me I was a good person and that my wife had no idea what she was losing. She urged me not to let Lisa's actions change who I was and offered to see me again if I ever returned to town. My trip to Vegas and Hannah's words left me more introspective than ever. Reflecting on what she said, I realized she was right. Despite Lisa's 3 decades of being a devoted wife and mother for her betrayal, I couldn't let this marriage break me. Upon returning from Vegas, I instructed my lawyer to start drafting the divorce papers. Additionally, I decided to dig deeper into Mark Howard's background. Following my lawyer's advice, I hired a private investigation firm to look into his past from high school to the present. Despite the firm's hefty fees, I didn't hesitate, knowing that half the expenses would be covered by Lisa's share. Confident in the firm's thoroughness, I expected to have all the information I needed before Christmas. I also approached my boss about transferring to another branch of our company. Initially surprised by my request, given my previous resistance to relocating, he promised to look into it and get back to me. As Thanksgiving approached, I faced another challenge. Emma called me about a week before the holiday to invite me to dinner. When I asked if her mother and her new partner would be there, she hesitantly confirmed. Hearing this, I declined firmly and ended the call. Unexpectedly, my brother-in-law reached out to me soon after. Michael called my office and requested a meeting. We arranged to meet at a quiet bar in the city center that evening. I noticed Michael was visibly upset. After some initial small talk, I ordered 2 double scotches and sensed something was troubling him. I leaned back, ready to listen, as Michael began to open up about the situation with my wife and daughter. Michael expressed frustration with both Emma and Lisa being infatuated with Mark, feeling that Mark was arrogant, self-centered, and selfish. He apologized for disrespecting Lisa, but explained he had lost all respect for her since she left me. Curious, I asked why her departure affected him so much. Michael revealed that his own mother had cheated on his father, leading to his parents' split and his father's descent into alcoholism, ultimately ending with his mother's death in a car accident with her lover. He despised cheaters and couldn't stand Lisa anymore, though he pretended for Emma's sake. He was worried about the potential impact on Emma, fearing she might be tempted to stray, too, if her mother kept praising her affair. I had never heard about Michael's parents before and felt deep sympathy for him. Yet, I was intrigued by his concern. He mentioned being worried about the saying like mother, like daughter, and questioned how long before Emma might follow in her mother's footsteps. I understood where he was coming from and assured him I had some surprises up my sleeve and that things might start to change in the new year. I hinted at plans to make Christmas special for him and Emma, though not for others. Michael's smile appeared for the first time since we sat down, and he tried to extract more information from me without success. As we wrapped up, I reminded him he had forgotten to try to persuade me to come to Thanksgiving. Michael's smile widened as he invited me, but I shook my head, declining but appreciating the invite. Emma called twice more before Thanksgiving, pleading for my attendance until I finally put my foot down, reminding her of the no-contact rule her mother and I had agreed upon. I explained I'd already broken it once for little Thomas's birth, but wouldn't break bread with them. The holiday came, and I had a frozen dinner. I felt lonely and sad, but it was better than watching Lisa and Mark exchange affectionate looks. December arrived, bringing the prospect of another family holiday, which I dreaded. However, I knew it would be the last one I had to endure. December turned out to be quite eventful. Firstly, the company offered me a position in Spokane, Washington, starting in January, and I accepted it. Secondly, the private investigator's report on Mark Howard came through, and it was eye-opening. Mark had a history riddled with infidelity. 3 ex-wives had divorced him due to his cheating ways, and he had children from multiple women, each requiring child support payments. His last wife had taken half his pension in their divorce, and he had been demoted from an E8 to an E6 in his final year in the Corps. In short, his financial and moral standing was far from exemplary. The best part was that Lisa would receive her divorce papers on the first business day after Christmas. The holiday spirit was truly kicking in for me. I called Emma to discuss Christmas plans, and once again she insisted on a family gathering. When I asked if Mark would be attending, Emma got upset, telling me I needed to accept that he was part of the family now. Reluctantly, I agreed for the child's sake. Emma seemed genuinely pleased, though I doubted it would make everyone happy. As Thanksgiving approached, I faced another challenge. Emma called me about a week before the holiday to invite me to dinner. When I asked if her mother and her new partner would be there, she hesitantly confirmed. Hearing this, I declined firmly and ended the call. Unexpectedly, my brother-in-law reached out to me soon after. Michael called my office and requested a meeting. We arranged to meet at a quiet bar in the city center that evening. I noticed Michael was visibly upset. After some initial small talk, I ordered 2 double scotches and sensed something was troubling him. I leaned back, ready to listen, as Michael began to open up about the situation with my wife and daughter. Michael expressed frustration with both Emma and Lisa being infatuated with Mark, feeling that Mark was arrogant, self-centered, and selfish. He apologized for disrespecting Lisa, but explained he had lost all respect for her since she left me. Curious, I asked why her departure affected him so much. Michael revealed that his own mother had cheated on his father, leading to his parents' split and his father's descent into alcoholism, ultimately ending with his mother's death in a car accident with her lover. He despised cheaters and couldn't stand Lisa anymore, though he pretended for Emma's sake. He was worried about the potential impact on Emma, fearing she might be tempted to stray too if her mother kept praising her affair. I had never heard about Michael's parents before and felt deep sympathy for him. Yet I was intrigued by his concern. He mentioned being worried about the saying like mother, like daughter, and questioned how long before Emma might follow in her mother's footsteps. I understood where he was coming from, and assured him I had some surprises up my sleeve and that things might start to change in the new year. I hinted at plans to make Christmas special for him and Emma, though not for others. Michael's smile appeared for the first time since we sat down, and he tried to extract more information from me without success. As we wrapped up, I reminded him he had forgotten to try to persuade me to come to Thanksgiving. Michael's smile widened as he invited me, but I shook my head, declining but appreciating the invite. Emma called twice more before Thanksgiving, pleading for my attendance until I finally put my foot down, reminding her of the no-contact rule her mother and I had agreed upon. I explained I had already broken it once for little Thomas's birth, but wouldn't break bread with them. The holiday came, and I had a frozen dinner. I felt lonely and sad, but it was better than watching Lisa and Mark exchange affectionate looks. December arrived, bringing the prospect of another family holiday, which I dreaded. However, I knew it would be the last one I had to endure. December turned out to be quite eventful. Firstly, the company offered me a position in Spokane, Washington, starting in January, and I accepted it. Secondly, the private investigator's report on Mark Howard came through, and it was eye-opening. Mark had a history riddled with infidelity. 3 ex-wives had divorced him due to his cheating ways, and he had children from multiple women, each requiring child support payments. His last wife had taken half his pension in their divorce, and he had been demoted from an E8 to an E6 in his final year in the Corps. In short, his financial and moral standing was far from exemplary. The best part was that Lisa would receive her divorce papers on the first business day after Christmas. The holiday spirit was truly kicking in for me. I called Emma to discuss Christmas plans, and once again, she insisted on a family gathering. When I asked if Mark would be attending, Emma got upset, telling me I needed to accept that he was part of the family now. Reluctantly, I agreed for the child's sake. Emma seemed genuinely pleased, though I doubted it would make everyone happy. When Michael, Emma, and the baby unwrapped their presents from Lisa and Mark, Emma was delighted while Michael remained polite but distant. As everyone finished opening their gifts, the room fell silent, and all eyes turned to me and my bag of presents. Breaking the silence, I decided to give everyone the gifts they deserved this holiday. Standing up, I retrieved the bag and handed Michael and Emma a large envelope wrapped in festive paper. Emma eagerly tore open the wrapping while Michael watched. Emma's joyful scream filled the room as she realized what was inside. Lisa shifted in her seat, eager to know. Emma explained that I had given them my house for free with no mortgage so they could move out of their rental. Lisa's expression turned from joy to concern, questioning where we would live. I fixed her with a piercing look and assured her I had everything figured out, handing her a card and a wrapped box. She unwrapped the box to find a bracelet with an inscription that read, "Thank you for the best 30 years of my life, David." Lisa seemed puzzled, noting I had forgotten to write with love. I explained that I hadn't forgotten but had chosen not to lie, as my love for her had faded these past months. The bracelet was my farewell, and a reminder of what she had sacrificed for her partner. I informed her she would receive divorce papers on Monday. Emma gasped while Lisa's face contorted in disbelief and despair. I nodded toward the card, explaining I had tried to express gratitude for the good years and our daughter, and included a check for half our liquid assets, though it wasn't much. The house was intended for our daughter when Lisa left our marriage. Turning to Mark, I sensed the tension building and handed Lisa another envelope, explaining it contained the full account of what her lover had been up to since high school. Mark exploded, threatening to ruin me, but collapsed as my stun gun made contact, ensuring he stayed down. Emma and Lisa stood up, horrified, as I administered another shock to Mark's groin to keep him incapacitated. I told them the pain he felt was nothing compared to losing the woman I loved for 30 years to a man like him. Lisa sobbed uncontrollably, and I told her I knew I wasn't as exciting as her sergeant, but wouldn't forget what she did. I administered another shock, enjoying his convulsions, and told Lisa I was giving her the ultimate gift of freedom, so she could live pampered by day and entertained by night. Lisa struggled to speak, tears streaming down her face, insisting it wasn't supposed to be like this and that she had planned to come back to me in June because she loved me. Emma rushed to her side, and I zapped Mark once more before Michael nervously intervened, concerned I might seriously hurt him. Standing over Mark, I looked at the two women I loved most, telling them I was leaving now and thanking them for the lovely day and wonderful life, warning they shouldn't count on seeing me again. Both women were speechless, staring at me as if I were a stranger. Michael handed me my coat, grinning with satisfaction. Before leaving, I addressed Emma, who looked at me with fear for the first time, advising her to take this as a lesson that if she followed her mother's path, she'd lose everything. I approached little Thomas Cribb, touched his cheek, and whispered goodbye, knowing we might never meet again. Still smiling, I headed for the door, wishing everyone a happy new year. By the time I reached my car, the shock had likely worn off. I distinctly heard Lisa cry out, "No, this can't be happening." Starting the engine, I thought about my new life in Spokane and the possibility of seeing Hannah again. As I backed out, Michael emerged from the house, smiling and waving. I returned the gesture before driving off into a new life out west, feeling a mixture of relief and trepidation.